the Bandra where I live, some 200 new buildings are coming up. Some of the names that are coming up are just next level.
I was driving down this morning and I saw some really strange names and I thought of your show. I said, I'm sure Anuvab has seen those.
One Greek god and builder's son. Those two.
So
Varun Helios, Rajiv Pegasus. There is Sudhir Hercules is a building in Sakinaka. Like a Bengali wedding, the father of the bride, it's like a funeral. He's like, why have you come? There's some food, come. So that's the vibe that he sends up. You know? Punjabi wedding, the wedding is in Chandigarh, people in Toronto are dancing. You know what I mean? It's just some other level of stuff.
Hello everybody, we are back this week with a very exciting guest. Our guest wears many hats. He's a polymath of sorts, a screenwriter, a storyteller as in a novelist. He is an actor, a podcaster, and above all, he is a stand-up comedian. The New York Times have called him India's most intelligent comedian. Ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce you to Anuvab Pal.
I have done some of those things, but I've never been in the company of charming young women being introduced like this. So thank you for having me. This is quite rare. The life of stand-up comedians is usually surrounded by criminals and murderers. So I don't often get to visit very cool podcasts hosted by Gen Z people like you. So,
Gen Z people. We'll take that. We'll take that.
We are dying to be Gen Z actually at this stage.
What I'm saying, yeah.
So congratulations, you just got married. Again.
Yeah. I thought we'll talk about funny things of the week. I didn't know that personal life was going to come up.
Actually, what I was getting at is that you got married and you got married in Calcutta.
We did.
And Calcutta has been in the news recently because of Sita and Akbar.
That is correct.
Sita and Akbar are a very interesting couple who've gone into our courts.
So the tigress, I've been to that zoo quite often, and they keep, basically they would have kept these two tigers quite close to each other. Calcutta Zoo doesn't have a lot of place for tigers to roam around. And of all the zoos in India, if you follow the stories, there's always some crazy shit going on in Calcutta Zoo. Did you read the story about the guy trying to garland the tiger who was eaten?
Yes,
There's
recently.
Often around New Year's Eve or during Kali Puja, there's one alcoholic Bengali man who will jump into the thing and try to garland the tiger. And more often than not, it ends the same way.
They're all eaten?
All eaten. And initially the tiger will be like, I'm a tiger man. What are you doing here? What are you doing here? And the tiger was also like, another drunk Bengali shown up. Just
It adds to the flavor.
yeah, he's like, doesn't want to eat the person. Then they slap him around. Then the guy is constantly like trying to garland the tiger. He's like, oh God, I gotta kill you now. So then he kills him. Now this is a new one because a tiger of a certain nomenclature. Obviously, two tigers wanted to get together. They don't know what their names are. No. So they are just being tigery as they're supposed to be. Man and woman, right? It was man and woman.
Yeah,
tiger.
I would
Yes,
imagine
yes.
Akbar and Sita.
Yeah.
But
Although these days you can't tell, right? Because
There's so many genders out there.
Yeah, correct. And also, was there consent sought before the names were given? I don't think so.
Yeah.
So now that's ended up in court, what is the court saying? Who named them?
Yes, the poor gentleman has been called to ask the rationale behind the names, I think, the last I read.
He has many excuses, right? That whichever the zookeeper is, he's like, boss, listen, I got to give them names. These are famous names. I don't know they'll get together. And we will live in an India where this will be seen as an issue.
A love jihad has happened.
Yeah. So he's saying one is a king, the other is a mythological goddess. I didn't know that these people... Like, why are you blaming me? I had to come up with names.
But living in India, is there ever a dearth of material?
Never.
So you just have to open up the newspaper and see the city briefs and something or the other happens.
But the main thing I enjoy is also looking at the world from their perspective. Right? Like in this story, I'm fascinated by the names the zookeeper would have rejected. He's like Govind tiger ka naam was a tiger. Like he must have gone through the list, He must have thought of some Bengali names, Shomoresh. That's not going to work for a tiger.
The Bhalo naam, Dak naam.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, all of that. So nickname, then they'll think female names. Can I call her Aparajita? Sounds like a Ray film. I don't know. So like they would ultimately had got to these names, and then the Tigers went and jacked him by getting together in a very polarized India. So he's just the wrong man on the wrong end of history. That's all.
What a tragedy.
He's otherwise a normal zookeeper, right? Like 15 years ago, someone would have told him, "Take Akbar, kya kar raha hai?" It wouldn't have gone to court, you know, like. So that I just think that you constantly, if you just keep your eyes and ears open, there's something that's always happening.
Anuvab, were you always, so this is what I want to understand. Are you an only child?
I'm an only child.
And at what age did you start becoming this person, and did you crack jokes to amuse yourself? How did this sense of humor develop in you?
You know, I don't know if I ever thought that I was a fun person. But because I was an only child, I spent a lot of time observing. And I see this, I have a little nephew, and I see this in him as well. If you're on your own, you read a lot, you observe a lot. Because my parents, you know, they're their friends, they're out, you know. So and you don't grow up with too many people your age. So you just tend to observe. And some of those things you observe as a child, you think are absurd. And you think as an adult, they'll seem normal. You grow up, you realize they're not normal, they're still absurd. You know, and that's where I think the humor comes from. It's just, you keep thinking, this is ridiculous. Anything like the strange thing, like things you'd see in India, or something someone will say to you.
I attended a stand-up show by Anuvab in London recently. And I think you were the 5th or the 6th act that evening. All the guys before him, the men as well as the women, I felt they were trying so hard, Anuvab, and I'm not saying this to flatter you. I'm saying in terms of material, comic timing, and just authenticity as a funny person on stage. You know, there were sex jokes, there were all sorts of jokes to try and elicit a few chuckles from the audience. And then comes our man. And you don't know this reaction, perhaps you do, but you know, maybe you're just so used to it. But for me, this was delightful to observe that, you know, everybody in the hall was cracking up wildly. And you just had to, with your poker face, say things. So, you know, this kind of, I mean, there is comedy and there is comedy. And what do you attribute the success of your comedy to, even in a very clinical, detached manner?
Well, you know, I think that if you're not the winner in any situation, you know, and this goes back to everyone from, because we are little, I'm a child of the 80s, right? So I grew up in an India where that kind of failed hero was still around. So your Amol Palekars of the world, the early Rishikesh Mukherjees. And that coupled with British humor where the protagonist is always a loser. He's failed in something. You know, and then American influences like Woody Allen or Seinfeld, they're all about not winning. So when you come from that perspective, then in all your stories, if you've somehow not understood the world or failed in some way, the audience is with you generally. The kind of comedy that exists in the world now, a very sort of like American comedy, like the Kevin Hart, that kind of comedy where, you know, I'm a winner and I'll tell you something and you're a loser and I'm above you. That kind of comedy is very alien to me.
Okay.
Because I'm like, if you're already a winner, then where are your weaknesses? I'm not. I think people love vulnerability more than humor. If you can be vulnerable, I think as a storyteller, and all those other things, punchline, where people laugh, those are mechanics. Wo ho jayega. That it'll come and go. But if you can be vulnerable, I think people enjoy that. I think people, and if you're I think the most important thing in comedy is truth.
Okay.
Like at some point, everyone in the room, more than the joke, should be able to say, this happened to me.
So with comedy, a lot of it, when you write your material, it's observed. It's either political observations, it's lived experiences which are painful. How do you filter out what you're going to use? What is your barometer for knowing that this is something that I'm going to turn into a skit?
Yeah, and that it'll work.
Yeah. It's hard. Like, technically everything can be material, but some things just strike you, right? Like, so lately, I don't know if you guys have experienced this, but lately, because of the number of flights over Bombay, usually when you're flying into Bombay, you'll probably hold for 45 minutes
Right.
at
Yes,
least,
right. Yes,
right? It's
yes.
a thing now. where the pilot will, he'll come on and say, ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain, all pilots all have cool names like Ravi Govill speaking. We'll just be 10 minutes to landing, but with no clearance, so we'll be just hovering for 15 minutes, 20 minutes, hovering. Or he won't say hovering, he'll say we'll just be in holding pattern for 10 minutes. And he'll keep buying time, right? He'll say flight attendants, 5 minutes to landing, 40 minutes to landing, 20 minutes to landing. He just keep announcing. And I was like, this is dead time, because you look at the audience on the plane and they're like, oh, because they just want to land and get there. They get damn annoyed when that happens. I think that would be a great place for the pilot to do something surprising. Like, ladies and gentlemen, we're holding pattern 20 minutes. I will now sing you a song. So that's where I get absurd thoughts. I'm like, it would be really good if the pilot, everyone's complaining, grumpy, they're hovering for 15 minutes. The flight from Chennai was 2 hours. They're already circling for 30 minutes. He's like, imagine the pilot just said, ladies and gentlemen, just Raat Kali. Like he just starts. And you go like, that'd be a good place. So that's the thing. So I make a little note in my phone. I was like, this would be a good place for a pilot to start singing. And then I'll say it at the first show, and it won't be good. But I'd have said it, and some mechanics will form. Say, oh, this is broadly where the joke is, but the laugh is coming here.
Okay.
I'll do it again, expand it a little. By the 4th show, it'll become a little thing. And then by the 6th or 7th show, it'll get a little longer. And the whole thing that I'm telling you, which was 30 seconds, might end up being 4 minutes.
So a lot of it is also improv because you have your basic material but so what happens? Do you ever have nerves? And when you first started doing stand-up and you were working on Wall Street.
I started working on Wall Street in the late 90s. I worked for 2 years.
Where did you do your education?
In the US.
So what did you study?
I did my undergraduate, I did in English literature and economics. And I went to grad school to study dramatic writing.
Okay.
And I did an MBA in the evenings.
My God, you are really seriously qualified.
Well, I'm not really, not
I'm
compared to
stand
most
up
people.
straighter with a little more respect.
No, but this was years ago when it was much easier to get into colleges.
Okay, now don't
and also much cheaper. So it wasn't that difficult at all.
And then, so after that, as a Bengali kid, you announced to your parents one day that I'm coming out as a comedian?
Many years
professionally?
ago. Many years
How
ago.
did they take it?
So I started as a script writer.
Right.
So when I was working, I worked on Wall Street only for 2 years. Then I worked for Reuters.
Okay.
Now Thomson Reuters for a long time. 15
In the
years.
US?
50 years.
First 7 years in the US, 7 years in India.
Right.
Okay.
So in the US for 7.5 years, in Bombay literally exactly 15 years, And stand-up was never in my horizon. So when I was in New York, I met the film director Manish Acharya, who was at NYU, which is how, we met each other many years ago. And he was at NYU studying film, and I had gone to a screening of his, and I was studying and working at Reuters and writing plays. And he came to see a play of mine, and I came to see a film of his. We became friends, and together, over years in New York, we wrote a film called Loins of Punjab Presents, which did reasonably well, which is when I told Reuters, can I move back to India, because
It was a fantastic film,
many years ago, but because
we
I've
still
been
remember it.
writing films and I'd like to pursue that. So my fear when I asked my boss this, and my boss was a very tall Englishman, he's still around, I said, I have this side hobby, I have this moonlighting career. Is it going to be a problem? Because you can fire me now if you want, because this is a thing that I've always had, and news is coming out about it, and it's in the press, and my name comes out. So if that's an issue for the company, because they don't want their employees often to be doing 30, 40 other things. Although, like nowadays, it's much cooler. I've heard the Goldman Sachs CEO, global CEO of Goldman Sachs, is also a DJ.
How cool.
He's a world famous DJ also. So I said, I'm just telling you, you can fire me if you want. So he gave me a story. He said, you know how I'm in this company? I said, no. He said, I had so much spare time that I built a company on the side and sold it back to the company. So if anything, you're not doing enough with your moonlighting. It's not like I'm discouraging, you're not doing it enough.
How fortunate though.
He was very kind.
Yeah.
As long as, I was in sales, and as long as the numbers were okay, they were very kind to me.
Yeah.
Then you came back to India.
I came back, and we were very lucky because Loins ended up being a bit of a success. And that sort of
President is coming for.
allowed me to write another play, and which the film producer and director Rohan Sippy was kind enough to watch and pick up. And that began my collaboration with Kunal Roy Kapoor.
When did Chaos Theory come?
Just around that time. So
Okay.
then I wrote Chaos right after that. Chaos was originally a play in New York.
It was a play.
It was written originally in 2002 as a play, and then became a stage play in New York in Bombay because of Raul D'Acunha.
Okay.
He had seen the play in New York and wanted to do it here.
Lovely.
So they were like very active years, one after the other. And then the Comedy Store of London opened the Comedy Store in Bombay in 2010. And that's what made me switch to comedy.
Had you done stand-up before?
Never.
What made you decide to go
So
up on
I
stage
had
and be
actually,
naked?
you know what I had gone there for, you guys will understand this. I had gone there to write an article about them.
Okay.
So I was told you've written English comedy, they're opening a comedy store in Bombay. Man's World magazine,
Oh.
a gentleman called Murli, who is very much around, I think still, said, Anuvab, would you want to do an article on it? And I said, yeah, okay, I'll go do an article on it. I just thought, and Don Ward, who has subsequently been very kind and almost like a mentor to me, who was the owner of the Comedy Store of London, he said, I'm not giving you any interview. I'm short of comedians. Only 4 comedians had come in to
Okay.
audition. And at the time, there were no one. There were just 4 little boys. Today, their names are Tanmay Bhatt, Rohan Joshi,
Oh.
Abhish Mathew, I think Saurabh Pant. Saurabh, I don't think even auditioned because he was already doing stand-up at the time. So all these people are now legends in
So
their
you
own.
were filling in a gap.
He was short of one audition person. He didn't know who I was. He didn't know who any of these people were.
Come
And
audition.
None of us were anyone at the
Okay.
time.
But he knew basis your work, your
writing
right.
work.
How did he know you were going to be that funny?
He didn't know anything. He had come to India to audition people to put up at the Comedy Store because he said, I can't run it only with British comedians.
I see.
So this was
So you
after
were
a
the
conversation.
token. You were the token Indian.
Yeah, and for the first few months I was. First few months, all
And
of us
did you
were
not
the-
feel nervous? Did you not feel that? What if I can't get people to laugh
You know,
like I do in
at
person?
the time, those were my best years of comedy, my first 5, because I never thought I was going to do this for a living.
So you were not self-conscious at all.
At all. I was very relaxed. Because I'm like, this is something I do for fun. Some people play squash, I do stand-up. And all my most fun writing were those years. Because there was no pressure. Because I was like, obviously I'm essentially going to keep writing plays and screenplays. This is just going to be a thing on the side for fun.
Right.
But had you done stuff like, school plays and performances?
Yeah, I'd done all that.
So you were
I'd done all that.
comfortable with the stage?
Yeah.
But-
But there
So
was...
the thing I always want to know about stand-up comedians is that, okay, in India you're used to a certain sort of an audience. Now you go to a new city or a new country and you can see that the packed hall. And then to come and be funny. So do you ever get nerves? I mean, do you ever get, a little...
So I think now in hindsight, I've done maybe about 2,000-3,000 shows.
My goodness.
And I have played audiences from Thane to Oslo, right?
Really?
Norway with 300 Norwegian people, Oslo with Thane with 200
Norwegian
people
people
from
can
Thane.
laugh?
They have a sense of humor. They,
They
have an
a
excellent...
brilliant dry sense of humor.
I'm
Yeah.
reading some of the new writing from there today, but... okay.
Across the board, right? I've had audiences. I like that challenge. There has not been a single show from the first one to the one I did last night where I'm not terrified.
Really?
Terrified.
Even today?
Not only terrified, now I've got better with, I drink less coffee just before the show, not terrified. I'll tell you the thoughts that go through my head. I'm quitting.
No.
Every single one. Every single. And the show finishes and I go, that was okay. But you could ask my wife, you could talk to my family. There's not been one show over the 3,000 where I'm backstage saying, what am I doing? I don't even do this for a living. I have a master's degree. I can get a job. I don't need to do this. Like I'm just grumpy.
So you're pacing
I'm
back
miserable.
and forth?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Pal, I
Yeah.
wanted to ask you, I don't know if you've observed this, but Indians are suddenly doing really, I think Indians are doing the big fat Indian weddings, tempo has just a few notches higher, okay? And you do a lot of sketches about Bengali wedding versus Punjabi wedding and
Yeah.
whatever. So what is your personal take on weddings where, all sorts of international stars and singers are attending, singing, performing? The florist itself, the florist budget runs up to crores. And I'm not talking about even very well-known families from India. I'm just talking about successful business families across India.
Absolutely. I stay at a lot of hotels for gigs. And usually when I finish my show, which will be for some corporate, I'll go to the hotel room. Usually in the garden, there's something going on. So I think that the quality is quite high for comedy, but it can be higher. Well, did you see on Instagram, one of the weddings, they were being lowered. So they were lowered in a crystal ball. I think it was in India. It wasn't outside. Lowered crystal ball, but 4 sides of the crystal ball, fireworks were coming out.
It has to be India.
So the crystal ball. So from, I would imagine it would be like a 30-foot height. Slowly lower crystal ball, and dancers dressed as angels were basically like on different gymnastic poses along with them. Something happened to the central bar from which they were being lowered, and the orb fell. And the fireworks started basically splintering and setting little bits of things on fire. Bride and groom obviously fell out of it, dangling onto the ball, and then you see all the Baratis rush onto stage to save them or whatever. But clearly, high-level event management collapse.
You can't make this
Very
stuff up.
Shaguni kind of a
even
start.
a very creative storyteller will have to really struggle to come up with a scene.
That's why I'm saying comedy is very hard in
So
India.
tell me, this has to be an Indian wedding. Now that you tell me, I think I read about it somewhere.
But there's so many I've seen where the
But
bride...
they survived. They didn't get injured or anything.
I think they were injured, but they didn't die. Like, I don't think they've died. They're living.
That would have cancelled the wedding.
Yeah.
That definitely. Because
Yeah.
if you're missing bride and groom, it's a problem. It's I've heard of
You have a joke about bride and groom being shot dead also.
the mafia wedding. I thought that was the theme. That
Right.
at the end of it, kisi ko goli maar denge. It's part of the thing.
Yeah.
But you know, we had weddings in India where they shoot in the
Punjab,
air and
all Punjab weddings,
The
the groom,
shooting there.
and the groom
One time the groom died.
one
but
pregnant dancer died once.
One dancer died,
Right.
and often 1 or 2 guests will die. Like in Chandigarh, not Chandigarh so much, but Haryana, that
Ludhiana,
whole
yeah.
Jat belt,
So
Yeah.
attend at your own peril.
2-3 guests will die. That's just part of it.
Collateral damage of a good wedding.
2-3 guests will
मरे?
die. Yeah. And the caterer will tell you, ये लोग तो खाया नहीं, सब मर गए. So ये लोग नहीं
3
खाए.
plate come up the bill में.
वो mushroom उतना नहीं गया because ये मर गया. So so they get matter of fact, they'll tell you. But then that orb fell, then the sparks went everywhere, and then you can hear the guests say, "Hey, Natasha," whatever the bride's name is. So then they ran on the stage. And some poor event manager will get a firing saying, "What are you doing?" It's not his fault also. We have no basic safety standards.
Yeah. Can you tell us about, when you go to a Punjabi wedding versus when you enter a Bengali wedding? You said something in one of the shows about it being like some sort of a chotha.
Yeah, like a Bengali wedding, the father of the bride, it's like a funeral. Like
Yeah.
he's like, why have you come? Come. There's some food, come. They're there, give them bread. I don't know. They'll all be dead soon. I don't know what the point is. So that's the vibe that he
Yeah.
sends out. you know.
Right.
Punjabi weddings, the wedding is in Chandigarh, people in Toronto are dancing. You know what I mean? Like, it's just some other level of stuff. They're not even invited, they're just dancing in Toronto. 2-3 people die. It's fine. It's just, the vibe is just, the whole culture is very different. You're like, why are you shouting? No reason. But it's like, that's what, like when I do shows in Delhi sometimes, unfortunately, my audience is smaller because I do it in English, right?
Oh, so Delhi people don't get.
Delhi, South Delhi, a kind of Delhi.
Only
gets
South
it.
Delhi
And
will
then
get it, yeah.
if you go to
North
the extended
Delhi.
area, but I still do the thing, because like there are brilliant Hindi comedians in India who have a huge market, like Anuvab Pal, who I'm very fond of, Harsh Gujral. They have massive markets. They do it in Hindi, big. Now, because I do it in English and my audiences are small. It's South Bombay, South Delhi, Bangalore. So, but I'll still get some of the mass comedy crowd. And if there are Punjabis in the audience, like proper, judges, they'll be like, kya bol raha? 3 days later, they're like, I go on my social media, tu kya bola 3 din pehle? They'll get it 3-4 days later. मैं आ रहा हूँ मारने. I said, मैं चला गया हूँ, आप कहाँ मारेंगे? So it gives me a little time to escape.
I should be taking offense like a lot of people today.
Yeah,
Everyone has a
correct.
thin skin, but I'm Punjabi. I
Right,
hope.
correct.
So I hope
and
you're
you're
not-
cleverer. So, 3 days later, you kya bola tha English mein? It won't be like that. So,
This is the next question. He is always actually giving it off to the
The
Brits. And they seem to soak it up. They love it. Tell us a little about the reactions you get.
So I've always been interested. So the work in the UK I do is I've always been interested in the history of Britain in India, and the history of Britain, and British comedians are just generally very funny, right? And I think that when they talk about contemporary British things, it's very hard to come up with something funnier than that. Today they had something where they're interviewing Rishi Sunak, and clearly he's speaking outside some conference, okay? And you can't see the interviewer. The woman is off screen. So there's Rishi Sunak, and within the frame, there's some sculpture of a horse. Within the frame. So it's probably in the lobby of a 5-star hotel or a convention center. There's some horse and Rishi Sunak in the frame. So now they've posted the interviews. So the woman is asking legitimate questions. What do you think are the chances the Conservative Party is answering? But in the frame, you see that in the distance, the sculpture of the horse and Rishi Sunak. And the first tweet goes out, first time a prime minister has been interviewed by a floral horse. So you can't do better than that, right? So I'm like, then can I do that for the history of Britain and India? Like, can I bring humor to a serious topic? So that's my interest in the work I do in Britain. The work I do in India is, I'm interested in contemporary India, like this sort of stuff, train going off on its own, like this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
For example, the things I'm interested in India are very different. Like, things I'm interested in India are like children's names nowadays. That will have no relevance in Britain.
Tell us a bit about that.
You know, like everywhere I go now, all the boys, and you would have seen this in the posh schools, the parents are making, at least a certain class of Indians, want to make their children West ready.
Okay, yes.
Right? So they don't want to name their child Abhimanyu or Mohan. So all the men have the same names: Vivan, Tahan, Ahan, Shahan,
Correct.
Vahan. And
Arush.
the women are all Shanaya, Tanaya, Vanaya,
Kiara,
Shanara, Kiara,
Kaira.
Ayara, Uvara. Everyone sounds like a restaurant in Tehran. You know, like it's just...
Ovara.
Yeah. So Uvara is probably not a name, but it's...
I also love the section that when we're talking about names right now, about the names of buildings in Bombay.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, God. I just did a show for builders on
Yes.
Saturday. And they were telling me that, you know, if you think this is bad, you should see the Bandra where I live. Some 200 new buildings are coming up. And some of the names that are coming up are just next level.
Absolutely. I was driving down this morning and I saw some really strange names and I thought of your show. I said, I'm sure Anuvab has seen those names.
Yeah, the Greek. Can you
It'll
just...
be
So,
Loda something.
Yeah. So one Greek god and builder's son.
Son.
Those two.
So like...
So Varun Helios. Rajiv Pegasus. That is, Sudhir Hercules is a building in Sakinagar. Sudhir Hercules is a real building in Sakinagar. It exists. But apparently new ones are coming up. There's a building coming up called Wakanda.
Wakanda.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Then going away from the Greek god mythology now.
Correct. And
They're
Wakanda
looking-
is from that Marvel film.
Yes,
no?
that's
It's-
right.
Yeah.
Now we're going to go
Exploring
the
new
Marvel route
mythologies,
maybe.
yeah.
Yeah. But it'll be like Kalpatru Wakanda or something, which is just... gods and
What do you
goddesses.
think is this affectation of our builders with, wanting to
No,
have...
it's because they want posh people to buy it, right? Like if the building was
I
called
see.
Sukh Sagar, none of you would have.
Everything is online these days. Instagram is such a big medium. Everybody is an influencer today. What is your take on that? This whole influencer culture, especially in India.
I mean, our whole entire game has changed, right? Like comedy, when I began, was like theatre. So you sold tickets, physically people came, and you left, and whatever you made from the box office was your living. You saw your audience, etc. Now, if you want to build any comedy audience, and it started with YouTube in 2010, and some comedians were brilliant at adopting to YouTube much earlier than some others were. I was very late at it, but say an Atul Khatri or, people, colleagues, friends, Kunal Kamra, they were very good at adopting to YouTube. And really, comedy blossomed in India on social media. If you really think about clips you watched and enjoyed, they've been on your phone.
Yeah.
Yes.
And you have then maybe later, much later, gone and seen the person live.
Correct.
But most of it has been on the phone. So social media has completely transformed the comedy game. Just like it has music, for example. So what happened with us is for the first 7 or 8 years, it was YouTube. You became big on YouTube. Then you traveled around. So comedians who were already having stage careers had to switch to putting
This
out
format.
a lot of their content on basically for free all over the internet.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then be clever enough to write new stuff when the public came. Because in our country, culture will be consumed for free. Anything people like for free.
We don't like to
Yeah.
pay.
They don't want to go and pay.
But there's also an ease of consuming, from your phone instead
Yeah.
of going and queuing up, getting tickets and sitting inside it.
And will he be good? Will he not be good?
Yeah.
So then, slowly, a lot of us realize that social media is really an advertising tool. So you don't want to put up your whole show there. You want to put up bits and pieces.
Right. So who are your favorite actual comedians? I won't put you in a spot with the Indian ones.
So many.
But the ones you find most inspiring and you look at them and you're like,
Well,
that guy's got
I've
game."
been very blessed to spend a bit of time with Eddie Izzard. I got into comedy because I just absolutely was obsessed with Eddie Izzard. Because he just tells stories. He doesn't even think of the punchline. He just makes whole films on stage all alone.
All unscripted.
Well, they appear unscripted.
I see.
But it's quite detailed in the way he prepares them in his head.
Okay.
And we'll talk about like his trance thing and all that. But he's a brilliant. I spent most of his life being a brilliant comedian about world history. That's mostly was his topic. And I was in America. I had nothing to do with comedy, and a very dear school friend of mine, Samir Gandotra, who's in a different line of work. He has a startup, and he said, "Pal, you need to watch this guy. I think he's right up your alley." And it was a 4-minute clip I saw about Eddie Izzard talking about the history of the Roman Empire, Hannibal, and it was just I didn't know that could be stand-up. That you could just tell stories, play all the characters and make a whole film on stage alone. I just didn't know that was possible. I mean, now he's doing Hamlet, etc. And 27 years later, I'm still very fortunate to have, to at least in the UK, to be in the same, so we have the same agency where we represent people. And 30 years later, I got to finish my Edinburgh show, and the people producing the show said, "Do you have 2 minutes?" I said, "Yeah." Eddie Izzard is here. He saw the show. He wants to have a chat.
Wow.
Oh my
Wow.
God.
So we're walking in Edinburgh, and Eddie Izzard goes, "My name is Eddie. Just as polite as possible. My name is Eddie. I don't know if I'm a comedian."
My God.
And I said, I don't think you know, because ma'am, he had already transitioned. And I said, "Ma'am, I got into comedy because of you," etc. And we've been in touch on and off ever since. It's surreal it's almost in many ways it's so intimidating, because you get into a profession because of a person. Now you know the person. Like, it's too intimidating, I think. It's like if you got into writing books because of Salman Rushdie or whatever,
Yeah.
and then you're friends with them.
no,
it's
very
just-
uncomfortable. Never.
So I am still very. I have now had a chance of meeting her about 8 or 9 times, and we've exchanged messages, and also she's been a bit of a mentor. So, when you say that last bit, move that last bit around. Like, it's just still surreal for
How
me.
amazing. Listen, so before we let you go, so this writer, Alan Pease, he's a body language expert. I happen to him, and he's written this book called Why Men Don't Ask for Directions and Women Can't Read Maps. And he was telling me that, I met him over lunch. And he was in India, and I had to take him out to lunch because he was performing in the evening for an audience that I was a part of. So he says that, it was very interesting. So he says that, I said, "What did you observe about my body language at the end of the thing?" Because he coaches world leaders like Putin and all. He'll tell them how to sit, how to shake hands, the power move, all of that. He works with world leaders. So I said, "What did you learn about my body language?" And he said that, "You must be intimidating to men." I said, "Why?" He said, "Because you're tall and you're funny." So I said, "You've taken my only 2 assets and turned them into a liability." So he said, "You must understand, most men, when they say, 'I want a woman with a good sense of humor,' they mean someone who can laugh at my jokes."
Right.
He said he was married previously to a woman who was very funny. The marriage failed. He said, "My current wife, I cracked the same joke 25 times. She laughs at it every single time." And I think the whole idea that women can't be funny possibly either comes from this need in men to be funnier, because I think humor is about power. Would you agree?
So this is definitely what he's talking about. Seems like a power thing, right?
Power and seduction.
Yeah. It
So
seems
what is
like,
your take on the women being funny and humor as power?
So I don't think in terms of gender. Like, for example, people would think that, I'm, between my wife and me, I'm the funnier one in the house. You would think, because I work as a comedian. My wife is much funnier than me at home. Much funnier.
I get
In
that.
fact, if you guys socialize, I'm not. I wouldn't say I'm dull. I think I contribute, but the silliness that happens in my life comes much more from my wife than me. She's fun, and most of the women I know have been fun. I mean, I've met as many funny men as well. I don't think you can break it up by gender. I do think that men want to do a power thing by making women laugh, but maybe they don't receive humor as well.
They don't.
From women.
Most funny men, actually, you are one of the few people I've interacted with who can laugh at someone else's joke.
Yeah.
But most men who are funny, professionally or otherwise, do not want to acknowledge
Yeah.
anybody else's humor, least of all a woman's.
Yeah. So
Why
they're
is
not.
that?
Then they're not listening, right? That's.
But
the thing.
why? Why? What is the thing?
So then they're not really interested in comedy. They're interested in power. I think they're interested in humor as a tool for what I can do, which is different from being interested in comedy, right?
Right.
Like we were going somewhere. We were going to Mud Island, and we were going to an event. And I looked at Shunali. You may not remember this, and it said we were on a boat. So I said, "Is this a boat?" I asked her, and she said, "It does the job of a boat." So it looks like a boat. It does the job of a boat, which I found very funny. Now, that's just someone saying a funny thing. Now, I'm not thinking, oh, what is the gender of Shunali, my friend, and how is this humor coming from him? But if you are thinking like that, then you're not thinking of the joke or the comedy that's coming. So if a group of men are making a joke that they deem, and it may not even be offensive, that they deem offensive, they somehow would be like, say Anita walks in and they're like, what are you guys talking about? They say, hey, this joke is not for you.
That's right.
So you're using double standards. How do you decide whether it's not for her? Maybe it's a very profane joke.
Yeah.
But she's a 40-year-old woman. She can decide whether a profane joke is a profane joke. Who are we to, that's where I think it's discriminatory.
Fantastic.
Right? Like, the world is the world. It's a terrible joke. It's about some horrible thing.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
it's about sex and it's about animals, whatever it's about. Let her decide if it's offensive. No, just tell her the joke.
Yeah.
Having said that, with today's posh standards, maybe they prefer to play it safe in
Yeah.
the workplace.
It could. No,
Yeah.
of course.
Yeah.
Of course. So, yeah, it's again depends. First of all, maybe you shouldn't be cracking this joke in the workplace at all because it's the
Correct.
workplace.
Interesting.
So our final question now, what is your, you juggle so many different careers, so to speak. How do you find, and they all involve thinking and writing, ideating. What is your writing routine like? We know Kiran and I want to know this as writers, and for other creative community, what is your process like? How many hours in a day can you devote to, consuming world news because that's where your material comes from, and finding the time to write not just your sketches, but also write, whether you're working on a novel or a play or something.
Script or
Just
Film
tell us
scripts,
about
yeah.
that. Yeah.
And also I have the additional problem of half my life is UK, half my life is Bombay.
Correct.
Okay.
So
You're working with something with the BBC on something as well.
I am currently, yeah. So it's also writing for two entirely different audiences as well. I don't know. I mean, I haven't solved it. Maybe you guys have solved it. Step one, you got to cut down social media intake.
I need to learn that. I
The
really
other
need
day,
to
my
learn
wife said, hey, they made this new computer. See this new computer where there's no social media on it. And I was like, do you mean a typewriter? We used to have those. And she's like, yeah, typewriter. They've come up with a new type. So it's like, are we going to go back to that? Because I see the point of it. Because now you need that machine without all that stuff in it. Every 2 minutes, I'm like, I've got to check Gmail. I've got to check my WhatsApp. There's got to be at least an hour. I have a relative who does productivity workshops. And he says that you need 30 minutes, at least 25 minutes. It's called a Pomodoro.
Pomodoro
You
technique.
need 25 minutes of focus to be able to finish a thought or just whatever you're writing. Because I haven't figured it out.
Have you removed Insta from your phone as well?
I did for a while. I have it back now. I think I'm going to get rid of it again.
Okay.
I
think
don't
I'm
have the
going to do the
discipline.
same.
I just don't have the discipline to be on drive. Like, for example, when I'm on why am I not listening to a podcast? Because I have Insta Reels. That's why. So it's,
Same.
I think our fundamental relationship with why am I not reading an article? That at least it's long form than 10 seconds.
Yeah.
But I think you need peace and quiet to be able to create.
Okay.
I think for me, what works, the best way to write is I write comedy every day. So I write a couple of jokes every day. And then I see where I'll try it out. But every show, I try to put in one new gag at least, depending on the audience, even to keep myself fresh. Otherwise, it's like playing the same 10 songs.
That's the thing, yeah. But Anuvab, in your case, because you write comedy and so much of it is based on current affairs and what's happening in the world around you. And for Kiran and me, now that we do this podcast, we have to especially be clued into some of the stuff that's happening. So that also needs extra time. When are you consuming news?
So the first 2 hours of my day, the following things. I wake up, I listen to the BBC World Service podcast for half an hour.
Okay.
Indian Express, 3 things. It's an excellent podcast.
Very good podcast.
Yeah, they tell you the 3 top news stories of the day. So
Okay.
those are my news podcasts of the day.
Lovely.
In my inbox, I don't have a newspaper. In my inbox, I get The Signal. It's a thing that summarizes India's broad India news.
The top news.
I get Indian Express Espresso, which summarizes India news. I get the Day's Guardian and the Day's New York Times.
Okay.
On weekends, I read Mint Lounge, and I get the summary of the film weekly from The Guardian and the Sunday New York Times Magazine.
Okay.
So that's broadly my reading.
No, that's a lot.
That's a lot of
Yeah.
reading.
Yeah.
But
But
that's
it's
important.
just all newsletters. If I like something, I'll go to it. And I get the Economist news
The
summary.
Summary.
Yeah.
That's
That's a lot of reading.
That's broadly the summaries, but then I don't have but I think broadly, I've read this my whole life, like a bit of the Economist, bit of the New Yorker, New York Times, Guardian, ho jata hai. You broadly get a...
So on that note, thank you so much. This has been delightful.
It's my pleasure.
Loved every
like I
minute
said,
of this conversation.
I don't get invited by young women anyway, so this is quite nice for you guys to have me.
Thank you for joining us.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much for all that, and I'm definitely going to try that inside. No social media.
If it works for you, I'll
Then
try
never
it as
memo.
well.